Today, we are thrilled to welcome Harini Gopalakrishnan, the Global CTO of the Life Sciences Division at Snowflake, to the podcast. With over 17 years of experience in life sciences, Harini has built a remarkable career at the intersection of technology and healthcare, delivering mission-critical results through innovative product strategies, program management, and implementation. Harini's passion lies in leveraging cutting-edge technology to solve complex business challenges in healthcare, and her journey spans the globe, managing diverse teams across geographies and functions. Previously, she was in an industry advisory role with AWS, led real-world evidence at Sanofi, and headed up the research informatics practice for Cognizant. She has worked with big data technologies within the life sciences domain and has leveraged Palantir, AWS, and Databricks from this perspective. Her industry expertise includes genomics, lab informatics, as well as clinical and real-world experience. Harini has worked on solution delivery, forging industry partnerships, creating go-to-market strategies, and pre-sales support. She has a master's in bioinformatics and computer science. She is passionate about driving innovation in her domain, especially with Gen AI and LLM like protein folding. Her AI-based RWE platform in Sanofi won the 2020 Gartner's Ion Innovation Award. Harini, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brandy, and nice to be here.
Yeah, excellent. You've had a remarkable career. It was actually really amazing to just dig into this a little bit, even just preparing for your introduction. Can you talk through a little bit about your journey and how it has shaped your approach to innovation in life sciences?
Sure. Thanks. First of all, thanks. I think my career is more of not staggering, but it's something more of learning on the job all the time, and every time you seek for something new. So, but looking back, it seems like a longer journey than what I feel as I sit right now. However, so personally, when I started, I was a tech computer science major, an undergrad, like most of us growing up in that generation in India, but the interesting thing is that when you take computers back then, data scientist wasn't a fancy word, but I was looking to more use it for solving a specific business problem. And rather than developing code for a technical solution or a product. So that's how I got into doing my master's with bioinformatics. And so that was a great learning. So I think that's the beginning of my passion or love towards the industry itself, because studying how proteins worked in the body or how genes operated was a big learning, because I wasn't a biology major in high school. Yeah. So that was a completely new world, and it just was marvelous. It seemed like a miracle that we can live and breathe. Every single thing has to work in order or work precisely the way it should work for us to even, make a single, like for me to talk or for me to even have a walk or see or anything. Everything seemed like a precise clockwork machine. So using IT or data crunching back then without cloud was interesting. So a lot of the innovation that I saw back then are now larger size because of the fact that we can do things on a cloud. But I always feel, and I always say that in every conversation, that life sciences itself, by nature of it, is transformative, that people have always employed, even if it's not fancy AI or machine learning, even if you call it statistics or modeling or simulation, people have always used that for long. They used to do it on-prem in compute clusters. Then with cloud, it brought easy scale and ability to do it larger size, as I said, with ease. So for me, it's just an evolution. And that's why I love this industry, and being in this industry, working closer to the use cases that are innovative has also helped me understand the technology that are innovative, because you always need the next big thing out there to solve some of these complex problems, because the data that you deal with is diverse. It's images, it's text, it's numbers. The compute that you run on them is huge. So you always can find a need for a very innovative new technology to bring value. So that's why I've been able to follow that through. And every job I do is always, or the next move I make is always about learning and what can I learn from that job than actually looking for something that's a bigger role, for example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a really interesting, coming from a data background, but then bringing this into the life science world and just having that understanding from kind of the data lens into life sciences is really interesting. And I know that you also have been on both the customer and vendor side, and that's
Yeah.
rather unique insight that not a lot of folks have. Can you kind of talk through that and how that has guided your role as CTO of Snowflake's life science division?
Sure. So it's always nice to be. I mean, I was a consultant before I became a customer. So I was heading up, as you said in the introduction, a small research informatics practice. So I have consulted for most of the big pharma for their research informatics needs. So Sanofi, which I later joined, was also one of my customers in the days I was heading up that practice. So, so when you're a consultant, it's always what I believe makes a good consultant is being able to think for the customer or be in the customer's shoes, or uh, be able to articulate or demonstrate in a meeting that you understand them very well, right? Communication is
Mm-hmm.
important, but listening and making them feel that you know what their problems are, what their pain points are, or even just repeating what they said in a better way or in a way that is solvable or understandable goes a long way. So
Yeah.
that I think is innately needed for every good consultant. You always already think of problem solving and you already think on behalf of the customer. But when I joined the customer org, what it brought me was the appreciation for the constraints in which they operate in.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think as a consultant, sky's the limit. Hey, this is a problem. This is a solution. Why is it not obvious that you just go implement the solution? And when you're a customer on the other side, you actually understand some of the constraints, organizational constraints, budget constraints, maybe bureaucracy that happens in every big, large corporation. So things that may prevent you from implementing the best possible solution that you as a consultant would have, thought it was a no-brainer. So that part, understanding the dynamics of a big org, being able to navigate that, building, stakeholders, networks, and collaboration, um, working with the right vendor. When you're a customer, you can see through the BS filter. So you always have vendors pitching to you, and then you already know because you've been there, done that. You actually know who might sound legit and who might not, and who's not got all the I's dotted and T's crossed. So asking those questions. So those are some of the things that really helped me. And but what I really learned was that how do you navigate the organization, right? How do
Mm-hmm.
you make sure that even if the solution is great, the problem is very innovative? Is that what the company needs at that point in time? That's what the company, if that value prop is not coming clear, how do you make that business ROI visible, right? What data points do you collect to convince management? Managing up is extremely important. Working closely with your business is extremely important. So I did not know real world evidence coming into Sanofi. I was coming from the research informatics world.
Yeah.
So learning that, right, sitting close to business and learning that domain, and seeing how technology can help the domain, always instilling the fact that the business is the king. We are working for them to solve their problem, to make their life easier. It's not like technology is not the king in pharma, it's an enabler. So having that mindset, managing up stakeholder constraints, those were the things I learned. So when I'm now on the vendor side, which is a great transition because that was the next logical step. You've been a customer, you've been a consultant, now you're going to be a tech vendor, right? It helps because every day when I have sales and they go sell, it's always good to remind them that maybe we think this is the best solution. I'm sure the customer thinks that's the best solution, but are they the right stakeholders to make the decision? Do they have the budget to make the decision? Are we helping them in demonstrating the value of the platform that we are trying to bring in to their business counterparts for them to be supporting in their decision? So these things you only can, you don't think of it logically as a technology vendor because for you, this is the best technology. It's a no-brainer. Other people are using it. Why is this customer not seeing it, right? But the advice, the expertise I can bring in is to think for them in their shoes and say, hey, these are the constraints they might have. So let's help them, our champions, be able to tell a better story, and let's help them give that messaging in a way that they can build confidence internally. So most of my job is about that change management aspect and telling that story through an industry lens.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective that you have, Harini. I'd say that your experience is very rare.
Oh,
and
thank you.
be
I hope so.
it's really hard to find people that can see all the different angles and to kind of not, I mean, it really sounds to me as if you're not necessarily looking at one thing as being the only, right? You're taking all the various stakeholders into consideration and all the different factors and figuring out what you're not blinded by all the other things that oftentimes blind people when they're in certain roles.
I hope so. I mean, it could also be that I'm overthinking the problem. So, I mean, I have to be aware that sometimes you don't have to solve for everything and maybe it works. But yeah, I like that fact that I can think through the different lenses, and that's probably what I think would be the unique skill that helps me. Or if I want to create a brand, that's what I would like it to be. That you can see it from different lenses, yep, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And something that you brought up earlier that I think is really interesting is you mentioned that life sciences, they've always used AI long before it became a buzzword. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and talk through how it's been applied and how it will be applied today and beyond?
So basically, life sciences is many different sub-industries by itself, right? At the highest level, if I were to break it into three, which most people do, which is research and development, R&D,
Mhm.
which is all about finding the drug and testing it on animals and then on humans and making, if it works and you prove that it's not toxic, you make a submission from the regulatory agencies to launch it to the market, right, for everybody to use. Uh, and then there is manufacturing, which is about making manufacturing the right way, the exact precise modality of the drug. And then commercializing, which is to take it to the field and make sure the doctors have it for prescription, or they're aware of it so they can prescribe, and pharmacies have it, etc. So at the as I said at the outset, there's R&D, there is manufacturing, and there is commercial, and they all deal with different things. And most of the time, in a big pharma, these three operate almost like different sub-organizations.
Yeah.
There is not a need for collaboration. It's changing. People would talk about enterprise data, enterprise strategy, but still, the decisions are pretty much made independent of each other. The budgets are made separate. There might be data sharing, but most of the time they tend to operate within that function. So if you ask where AI has been used, I would say within R&D, there is a lot more room for innovation, especially because when you talk about research, it's less regulated because you're actually in an exploratory space. You're trying to see what might work for what combination, and there are a million possibilities. There's a new target, or a target is basically what you study for a disease, right? That gets researched on by academia. There is a publication, there are tons of publication coming out every year that's studying a disease or saying that this might work, that might work, this might be an interesting protein to go after. So much of wealth of information that's coming. And so in research, you want to be able to search that space and then find something that's find something that's interesting and promising that you want to take or move forward so that it can become a drug later on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there is also, every pharma is going after, like oncology is something that every pharma is studying, right? So you also have to be there actively researching and experimenting so that you actually can find that secret sauce soon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there is more innovation, because you want to throw every tool, every trick up there and just need to make sure that you can go after it. You find something that is more promising than somebody else. And the faster you do and use AI or any other techniques up there, you have a better chance of success in the clinical trials and later phase, because it can get costlier. So
Mm-hmm.
for a drug to go to market, people say it's an average 16 years endeavor from the time you first study it to the first time you actually get it approved to manufacture it, to sell it. It could be 16 years minimum. And the later you go, so sometimes the drug can fail 5 years later on. Sometimes it can fail 10 years on, like you've studied it in animals, it works. You go to the first human, it's toxic, and you pull back, but that's already like 8 years to 10 years. So the more later it fails, the more costly it is for the company. And because of the effort, the time it takes to have gotten there, and the cost of doing it in humans is much higher. So you want to be able to find drugs early on that have a better probability of success later on. And to do that, you have a lot of data points. As you said, like I think through every lens. Similarly, for a drug, you want to collect every data point. You want to test it on cell tissues, right, much earlier, to mimic what might happen in a human later on. You might want to get with the newer diagnostics, with the newer techniques, sequencing techniques. You want to study the the biological break or smaller components of it, like omics or proteomics within that particular drug interaction with your cell much earlier on. Now you can also do a lot of image analysis where you can actually uh, see how the drug moves through your body or what changes happen to a cell when you inject that drug much early on. Because you can do a lot of electron microscopy scans and analyze those images, fantastic things. So back even in 90s and 80s, people have always studied these drugs using machine learning through on-prem clusters and compute, see how they might interact in a body using experimental data points through simulations. They call it in silico drug design, which means you're designing it not on a human, not on a lab. You're literally designing it synthetically in a computer. So there are companies like Schrodinger, is very well known, that have helped automate these algorithms and packaged it up so people can run these modeling algorithms using, back then, Linux operating system, run these programs, submit these commands that runs on a cluster and get outputs that feed your decision making later on. So that's when machine learning, or you can call it machine learning, started. And now you just scale it up. As I said, now you add more and more data. You can add genomics, you can add proteomics, you can add images. You add more and more data points, all with the intent. You can use generative AI now even to create new synthetic versions of drugs, or find how a protein might look using AI, or predict how a protein might look using AI. Things that you didn't have to do in the lab, things you had to do in the lab before. Yeah. So it's just improved on creating more data points that you can actually use to make decision making. So AI is ubiquitous, but even back then, if you could model and write an algorithm to do some prediction, people did it, and that's where it started in research.
Yeah, that's a pretty incredible journey. I mean, that's the ability to be able to do that in the 90s. It seems like nearly impossible, but I get it. And that had been dedicated to that particular field from that time. And now we're just expanding upon that and the capabilities. Yeah. And I don't know if you're seeing a future of just more predictive use of AI technology. I guess, where are you kind of seeing this shift and kind of come into what is this going to look like, I guess, for the potential future?
So AI have two aspects, right? There is predictive, and now, which everybody talks about, which is generative. So the predictive AI always has a future. I mean, most of the tasks are predictive. As I said, in research, you could predict whether this compound will be active or not, or small molecules or the drug. Back, as I said, early 2000s as well, you had algorithms that could do it. Now it's generative, which is you can also design new compounds or proteins based upon certain input. So that's where it has changed. But in the other areas which we never talked about, like manufacturing and commercial, the innovation wasn't that advanced as much as research, because research, there was no regulatory pressure. You could move fast. Time to insights was more important than the regulatory guardrails. But in manufacturing, for example, you could only move so fast because it was very important. There's a lot of constraints because of the fact it's called GMP, good manufacturing practices, that say that you need to be able to reproduce every single batch the exact same way that is outlined in the protocol. Obviously, you don't want anybody to distribute drugs that are not manufactured exactly the same way that is safe or effective for use, right? So you can only innovate so much there. Or if you innovate, or if you try AI, because AI is always, remember, heuristic. It's an approximation. It's probabilistic. It's not an exact rule-based inference. So you want to be sure that the prediction is absolutely certain that it's true before you put that into a process. So there is a little bit of innovation that can only do so much, because you need to validate it so many times. But predictive algorithms are there as well, because you can now kind of predict early on. For example, a good use case in manufacturing is what's a golden batch? Like, how do you look at certain data points coming from temperature sensors and say, based on which combination, what is the ideal batch parameters are going to be, right? What would give you the best performing batch, or how do you perform the yield to be optimized on which conditions, which starting point conditions, based on predictive analytics. In commercial, you want to use predictive analytics for figuring out where should your field sales focus the efforts on. Like, what is the for a certain geography, you have a certain physician, but they have a certain population that's aging, or a certain what do you call social determinants of health that point to some kind of disease. Say they're dealing with obesity, for example. You might want your field sales there to focus on a drug that might handle obesity, or you might want your field force to focus on a drug that has diabetes as the main. So looking at segmenting patient population or segmenting HCPs and providing them information on what is the next best action to do, whether to reach out to the HCP via email, whether via do a direct call or send them a PowerPoint or meet them at a conference, helping them guide on their decision making, or where predictive AI is used. And generative now has just helping with content creation, right? So now for all of these things, you want content to go and talk to some HCP. You want in the manufacturing world, you want content to be generated for FAQs, for example, or you want to know what is the right SOP for a certain deviation. Things like that is where the generative aspect is used. So predictive, 100%, it's implemented already even with the manufacturing commercial. It's going to grow, and generative is now the one that's bringing the operational efficiency, which is the next step. I predicted this outcome. Now help me write content. If content is one of the things, what do I do is help me generate the content.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point too, just in AI kind of always being a thing in R&D, but lagging on the manufacturing side, if we're kind of breaking it down into three parts. And I can see why, right? The manufacturing side it's very delicate. I mean, it's very complex. I mean, not that R&D is not complex, but when you're manufacturing at a mass scale and trying to create the same consistency, I can't even imagine the complexity of that. So can you talk through how the manufacturing side is now adopting technology, AI technology, and kind of what that looks like in terms of consistency and kind of bringing things to scale?
Yeah. So the manufacturing, first of all, when we say manufacturing, we're clubbing a lot of things in it. There are different modalities of drug itself, right? It started with pills, which we normally call small molecules. Then we have antibodies, or things that we call large molecules, which are like things that your body makes themselves, proteins. And the third now is what is the cell therapy, which is essentially taking something from your body and modifying it so that it can go and, especially for cancer, it can go and find the ones that are not conforming, like the cancerous cell, and use your own body's mechanism to fight them by doing some tweaks with your own T cells. So it's changed. So the manufacturing process for a small molecule, which is probably like your Tylenol or the pill that you take every day, is different from manufacturing something like a biologics or like a vaccine, for example, which is potentially a modified strain of the virus that you have to inject. And then the cell therapy is completely different, because you're not manufacturing in batches. You're taking every patient sample and then working on it and then sending it back for ingestion. So the complexity arises from the fact that even if you're one big pharma, you just can't say that I'll have 4 sites and all the 4 sites would I take care of all manufacturing there, or all these 4 plants will do it. It's not like that, because depending on in each pharma, you got to recognize they will be dealing with these different kinds of modalities. There'll be some that they will definitely might have some vaccines. They will definitely also have the small molecules, because they've always existed. They small molecules have been there forever, so that's what they've gotten into the initial existence. So they have to continue manufacturing that, which nowadays if it's over the counter, you spin that up as consumer health, and most pharma try to spin that out. But for other reasons, they exist and they have to manufacture that. And then there is some large molecule. Most companies still invest in that, in antibodies, monoclonal antibodies, and things like that. And then everybody now is getting on the gene therapy bandwagon. So you at least have 4 modalities and sites that have to deal, each plant has to deal with producing that. And each production will have to be so precise, because these can potentially have life-threatening impact, and it's regulated. One deviation, you would have a site closure. You'll have big ramifications. So you got to make sure that the SOP, there is a specific process. Each site and plant has to make sure that they follow the process precisely, documented, recorded, validated. You could have an audit anytime where the regulatory agencies come in, and you got to prove that your standards are impeccable. And the only way to do that is prove that every single thing you do is recorded. You can submit evidences of information from your machines that synthesize it, from the lab notebooks that run these experiments. People who are working there are trained. So you've got to provide a ton of evidence to make sure that the data is reproducible and you have everything under control. So with that regulatory pressure, as I said, it's not easy to change things. Even a simple tech upgrade, if you do it, you got to do through a validation process to prove that after the upgrade, everything that you touched upon hasn't changed. So input, you run a certain experiment, you got to prove that the output is the same. So that's a lot of effort, right? So change management is huge. So those complexities add to why manufacturing can't push forward a lot of innovation. But it's changing because there's a lot of companies that can do streaming. You can get data real time. The technologies have improved where you can stream the data real time. You want to bring operational efficiency because there is more and more need for certain drug types. And you want to be able to scale up your manufacturing so that there is no drug shortage. The only way to do that is incorporate AI somewhere to bring up these efficiencies, productivity improvements, etc. So a lot of companies are investing in making sure that they can modernize these plants, especially the newer plants. There is no problem because you can build it with that in mind.
Right.
The challenge is going to be in the older plants where they're already operating with a certain SOP. How do you go back and include these modernizations because there is a change in work?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see, companies like Catalyze, right, kind of taking their approach to helping out that manufacturing process? Can you kind of talk through that, how organizations like Catalyze are assisting on the manufacturing side?
So basically, it would be where there is a need for vendors is that you need to drive these automation and repeatable automation, and and most of the time it deals with reading unstructured data, being able to do yield optimization, being able to do find the golden batch, for example, things like that. So companies that can actually invest in AI and produce reproducibility in a way that they can implement it easily for each customer without them having to invest in rewriting the code, there is always space for making that happen. And hopefully, if you haven't seen Catalyze in action as in complete production version, yes. But the intent of Catalyze, I believe, is to make that AI easier for customers to implement. So there is a need for that. And then the question is how easy it is, how accurate is it, how reproducible it is, and how much they can scale to different modalities. We talked about a lot of that will play into its rollout.
Yeah, and thinking about Snowflake too, right? So how is Snowflake helping drive this innovation?
So a lot of our customers deal with data, because Snowflake at the very beginning is all about AI data cloud, data analytics, bringing compute to data. So it all starts with data at the end of the day. So the idea of Snowflake is like a performant analytics engine. So you can stream data, whether it's structured, semi-structured, unstructured. So in manufacturing, that means sensor data, data from your MES systems or your LIMS systems that are in the lab, that are in the plant. And being able to analyze them fast to make these decisions quick so that you can make course corrections before you actually create the batch. Say the batch takes 5 hours to run, and then at the end of time you figure that's a wasted one. You got to rerun the batch again, and that's delayed delivery for the end pharmacies. So you want to catch some of these errors early on, so you're not wasting time in creating a batch that's not going to work. So detecting that requires access to the data and being able to analyze the data really fast, right? And making those insights preventive. You want to be preventive, not reactive. So you want to make those analytics really fast. So that's where Snowflake helps is in, we have a separate manufacturing focus, which is both on process, which is what pharma deals with, but discrete, which is automobiles and others. But I can speak more only on the pharma side. So most of the conversations are around integrating with these systems, making sure the data lands in Snowflake faster, and then letting our customers get to the insights faster. And for that, There are native capabilities that Snowflake can do with AI, but we also work not just in manufacturing, but within R&D commercial with partners that can bring the life science focus, bring some of those, for example, life science would have its own data type, like as we said, gene data or proteomics data. And so we need partners that can understand this data and do the transformation and run certain algorithms that are specific. It's the same thing with manufacturing. You would like partners that can look at, say, a GMP documentation, read that, parse that, or do a golden batch analytics very specific to the features of interest for a pharma and do that. So also looking at partners that can integrate to make that happen quickly.
So that's where Snowflake and Catalyze partner.
That's one of the discussions.
Yep. Absolutely. As you're talking, I'm thinking about just the change and shift, also just in people, right? The talent that is required for this shift in this industry. Can you share some perspectives there? Like, are you seeing more data analysts, folks who have more of a holistic view and able to speak the different languages that kind of all three components, the different languages that the three components speak?
So I think the change management is not as much as we thought it would be before, because there's a lot of buzzword on AI, especially in life science. As I said, this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry was for generative AI work for life science and research. So it's literally something that's proven and people have embraced it. So now, of course, as I said, talked a lot about within R&D, it's more easy to embrace in manufacturing. The pressures of being very operationally efficient, the pressures of having to meet the growing demands of certain kinds of drugs in the market, there is a need to adapt, so that there is no resistance. I think the point is where there is a lot of changes in terms of being able to articulate the business value and making sure the change can happen seamlessly. So there is a lot of things that, especially in the world of manufacturing, things have run a certain way for so many years.
Yeah.
And now there is a need to change that. There's a need, even if it's not a big transformative change, there is some incorporations you have to do, and that's a lot of work. At the same time, while you do that work, you have to keep things running. Mm-hmm. So managing that, and how do you manage that skillfully? I think that's the struggle that everybody has. Of course, as I said, if it's a new plant that you set up, it's easy to automate ground up. It's easy when you start something new to incorporate the latest and greatest. The challenge again with manufacturing is there's a lot of plants that exist and that are running. How do you go back and modernize that? So these are some of the conversations that are happening, and it's not really a mindset change. It's more of how that is where the struggles are.
Yeah, and the plants that are already in existence, these plants are very expensive to build and to get fully operational. So it's not like an easy lift to start from scratch. So I would imagine that a lot of this work is going to be with legacy plants and manufacturing, and then figuring out how to slowly make these updates and integrations.
Yep, exactly.
When you are thinking just about emerging trends and opportunities, can you kind of talk through just how you think that these will be shaping the future of the industry?
I think we talked about it. Touched upon that a bit early on, but from an emerging trends, the manufacturing space, it's all about smart manufacturing. It's about automating the shop floor from ground up, being able to do a lot of preventive care. As I said, being able to figure out that some parameter is off. You might not get the golden batch, and course correcting it, getting alerts before it happens. There is a lot of need, especially with cell therapy, to build a cell therapy command center, which is because there is so many touch points involved in creating a cell therapy modality. You have the lab, you have the plant itself, you have the person who's administrating the processed cell therapy back to the patient. So there's so many touch points. And there's a shipment involved of going from the place where you collect the sample to the plant to the sending the finished shipment back. So a lot of touch points that has to happen. And you need a place where you can monitor all of that, right? And then make sure that there is no break in the process somewhere. There is making sure the samples you collect are good enough for you to actually do the lab work on and then do the manufacturing on and stuff like that. So there is a lot of need for technology building there and advancements there. So a lot of the direction I see is about integrating the data quickly,
Mm-hmm.
using AI to do preventive, predictive maintenance, maybe some generative AI to do authoring and productivity improvements, right? But or being able to ask a question like an FAQ or agent or something like that. But most of the work is going to be around automating the shop floor, making sure the data is available for analytics faster, using that for predictive calls so that you may take preventive actions. And for a very complex modality like cell therapy, building a plane where we can get feeds from every single interaction and again make decisions so that you're not wasting time anyway because of a failed information, failed capture. Yeah.
Yeah. The decision, the faster decision making, I see this just being a huge push.
That's the primary driver for all faster decision making to make save trouble later on. Yeah.
Yeah. Harini, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, can you just talk through the legacy that you hope to leave in your role at Snowflake? Since
that's a big word.
No.
I wouldn't say legacy. No, I mean, I just like what I do. I like talking like this. I like dealing with customers because I learned from everything I said. It's not something that I've been there. I've not been in a manufacturing plant myself, but I talk to customers. I learn from the interactions. I learn from the problems, and I learn from vendors on how they solve the problems. So it's nice to be putting things together, right? And learning every day. So I love my job. So no legacy or anything of that sort. I just hope that I can keep learning and keep sharing that knowledge. That's all.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. And we look forward to having you on again down the road.
Thank you. No worries. It was nice talking to you, Brandy, and good luck to Catalyze as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Harini.